So the careful consideration of town planning issues as well as tree issues will go a long way towards helping to secure a planning consent. Before any development project, though, should ever progress, a careful and accurate feasibility study needs to be conducted to ensure that enough profit margin can be made to warrant the risk of taking on the development project. In this next interview, we're going to be speaking with Mark Andrews from DevFeas. Mark's the developer of Feastudy 6, which is a property development feasibility software package, and Mark is probably the best person to be telling us about this software. So let's go have a chat with Mark. I'm with Mark Andrews from DevFeas. Mark, you're the creator of Feastudy 6. This is a property development feasibility software package that a developer can use to assess whether a particular development project will be viable or not, to determine whether there's enough profit in it, and if there is profit, how much profit can be made from the development project. I've used this software in the past, and I'll continue to use it because I see absolute value in it. To get us started, Mark, can you tell us a bit about yourself, and then tell us why you created this software and what was involved with its development?
Sure. My background is in real estate valuation and project management, and I have tertiary qualifications in those areas from the University of SA. I worked for developers for about 6.5 years doing project management work, and a lot of the time I did financial feasibility study analysis for property development projects and on a spreadsheet, and I found that a fairly cumbersome way to do things, but people thought that I was doing a marvellous job with them, and I thought there's a much better way to go with the development of software and make a commercially viable off-the-shelf package, and that was Feastudy. So it has come about from my theoretical knowledge and also my practical knowledge from working from developers and having input from developers.
Mark, what do you see as being the value of this software?
Well, Feasibility 6 Professional is a software package for the financial feasibility study of property development projects and property investments. So people can crunch numbers to find out whether it's worth buying a site to develop it or purchasing an investment property to get capital gains and or rent income from it. Mainly its use is for determining the residual land value of a development site, and also providing output for developers to get external finance from, say, banks to fund their projects.
All right, so Mark, tell us a bit about software.
Sure. The best way to show you how to use the program is for me to run it. So I'll go through a few screens.
Great.
This is the title screen of Feasibility 6 Professional, and the first thing to do is open a new file, and we go to File and New, and in the Select Type of Feasibility Study window we can choose a Development Feasibility Study, a Consolidated Development Feasibility Study, which is about consolidating the cash flows of up to 30 development files for corporate budgeting purposes. And we can also select a Property Investment Feasibility Study by clicking this button, and a property investment as defined by the program is an income producing property that's held for over 12 months for capital gain and or rental income.
Sure.
But we're now doing a development study, so we'll click that one, and we now have our menu expanding to give us development settings, costs and income, where we can enter our variables for the development. And the first window that we use is the development identification window, where we put in the development name, the type of development, whether it's a subdivision, residential or something else, and we put in the capital city for the capital city of the state or territory that we're in Australia. If we want to have the program load default duties, property rates and taxes scales for that city or state, and the program refers to those default scales if we select a capital city here. The next window is the residual land value calculation window, and the residual land value is based on a target internal rate of return or a target margin on development cost.
So as I understand it, you can essentially put in your targets, and then the program, once you've added in all the costs and all the income that you would generate from the sale of the developed product, will calculate how much you should be buying the land for.
That's right. The residual land value is basically the residual amount that you can afford to pay for the site based on the returns that you require and the costs and incomes that you've entered.
Excellent, great.
So we can put in values here. We can also put in a target on margin development cost or target MDC, and if we put in a figure there, the program has then got to satisfy as a minimum the target IRR of 15% and the target margin on development cost of 20% before it returns a value greater than 0. Next window is the equity window, and the default is for equity is not injected, and that means that the development is completely funded by borrowed funds. If we want to inject equity, to have a mixture of equity and debt, or just have wholly equity, we can start to use the equity options. Equity as a sum of money, equity as a lump sum instalments, equity as a percentage of the purchase price, equity as a percentage of total cost before interest, or equity as a percentage of monthly costs before interest. And I might just click on the help button here to show that this is the help for the equity window. Every data entry window in the program has a button for help, and that takes you to context sensitive help for that window. The next window to look at is the loans and interest window, and we have the choice between using only primary debt funds for the debt that we use, or both primary and secondary debt funds, and secondary debt funds are often known as mezzanine finance funds. And we have a tab for the development for the primary debt funds. So we enter an interest rate there and an establishment fee. We can have different rates over the cash flow too for the interest rate. The secondary debt funds, we have something similar where we can enter the borrowing interest rate, also the finance establishment fee, and also we can enter debt funds into the cash flow by entering provisional debt advances for particular months, or we can have a prepaid interest on our debt for secondary debt funds and enter an amount when that occurs, the advance is made and the date for that, and the number of months that's going to apply. Next window is the escalation rates window, and here we can enter escalation rates for certain things, and one that we might want to enter is the construction escalation rate. If we have a fixed price contract, we may not want to enter an escalation rate, but if we have it subject to escalation because it's not fixed cost, if we don't have a fixed price contract on the construction, we can enter a rate here so that the program will calculate a factor to multiply an unescalated amount for a particular construction cost flow month and give us the escalation that's relevant to that month. The next is the GST settings window, and the default's for GST to be remitted monthly, and the alternative is quarterly, and the default is also for a residential development type for the margin scheme to be applied. the alternative is the full taxation method.
It's probably fair to say that GST can be a bit of a minefield, so you'd certainly want to check with your accountant before you start ticking any of these boxes.
Sure, it might be well worth your while to consult your accountant about these things, because things like the margin scheme is quite a difficult area of taxation for GST, and so it's also a good idea to read the help on what's involved, what will happen with the margin scheme as well.
Great.
The next window is the other settings window, and here we can enter a contingency amount for our development as a percentage of all costs before interest, or as a percentage of all construction costs.
During a property development, it's not uncommon to have cost blowout. We typically like to have at least 5% in that contingency box, just in case something goes wrong, such as time delays or something goes wrong.
Sure, yeah, and as you refine your feasibility study, you might want to reduce the contingency amount if you can lock in certain figures like your construction cost, if you can get that nice and tightly fixed.
Yep.
And other things become certain, then contingencies could be a lower figure.
Sure. That's essentially where your risk profile is as well, I guess.
Sure. Okay, under costs we enter land costs, construction costs, consultant costs, rates and taxes, assessed values for rates and taxes if we want to refine how close we want to get to what we think are the actual rates and taxes for the property. Duties and conveyancing fees, that includes stamp duty on transfer, stamp duty on mortgage, and conveyancing fees paid by the developer in purchasing the site and also selling off the finished development. We have selling and leasing fees for paying the agent or whoever's selling the development for us, and other costs that are not covered by anything that's not covered by the above. Under income we can enter sell on income and also other income, and if we were looking at a development which involved rental income such as office, then we'd have rent income appear here as an option as well. This file is for a subdivision, so rent is not relevant.
Okay.
We have a reports menu, pull down menu to see our reports on screen. They're not all listed here because we haven't entered any data, and some will only come up as an option if we've entered certain data. We can have our graphs, and that's a bit of a quick tour of the program.
That's
Angelo?
excellent. That's great. Mark, this is a picture of the first project that we took on. When we purchased this particular property here, we purchased it with the intention of putting 3 dwellings on the site. So essentially knocking over the existing dwelling and putting 3 dwellings on the site. We looked at the development plan and we were quite confident that we'd be able to do that. The next step for us was to, prior to purchase, was to determine, doing a feasibility study, was to determine whether the project would be viable or not. Now, would it be okay if we were to use this software for me to reproduce that feasibility study just to show our viewers how it was that we had the confidence to be able to go forward with this development project and know that we were going to make a profit?
Sure.
Open up a new folder, property development, go to the development settings, development identification, let's just call it development. Development, it was a residential development. The city was Adelaide.
Mm-hmm.
The description, 3-unit site.
Right.
The location, we just put west of Adelaide, prepared by Angelo. The development dates were from June 2006 to August 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Residual land value calculation, we didn't use it in this instance here. Equity, we were using 100% finance in this situation, so we just leave it as equity is not injected.
Sure.
And the 100% finance came from, the 20% deposit came from our lines of credit, the other 80% came from the banks.
Right.
Loans and interest, we had an interest rate of 7.5%.
And did you have an establishment fee?
Yes, we did. So I put the establishment fee of 1%. Okay. Escalation rate, we had a fixed price building contract, so this isn't applicable in this instance.
Right.
GST, the settings here are correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we always like to have at least a 5% contingency rate. There are plenty of unforeseen circumstances that can arise in a development, and it's always good to at least insure yourself by putting in a contingency amount, and we like 5%.
And do you like that on all costs before interest, or all costs, all construction costs?
As a percentage of all costs before interest. So now we move to our costs. Move to land costs. The cost of the land cost was $300,000. $300,000. We had a deposit amount of $10,000 on the date shown. Construction cost. Well, for dwelling 1, the construction cost was $140,000.
Mm-hmm.
And the date was from September 2006 to August 2007. August 2007. And we use the S-curve method to calculate the interest being drawn down.
Right.
There were two other dwellings, so we'll just copy these. Back in and edit. This is for dwelling 2. Cost here was $125,000. Again, these are the dates, and we use the S-curve. Same as for dwelling 3.
Right.
So we had consultant costs as well. There were a number of consultants, the first one being the land surveyor. We paid him on a specific date. His costs were $4,900, and he was paid in September of 2006, or he would have been paid in September 2006.
Mm-hmm.
The next one was the architect. And you can quite easily see that it's pretty easy to be entering the data here. Development date, we paid him $9,000. And this was in September 2006. Next was the town planner. Paid in August 2006. Cost was $750. $750. Okay, the next one was the private certifier. Private certifier. This cost was $660, and that was in September 2006. And finally, for this this window here, we have the engineers. $3,000. Okay, so the costs, rates and taxes, this is automatically calculated, so we can leave that as is.
Good. No need to deal with that one?
No need for this one here. This is assessing land values and rates and taxes. Duties and conveyancing. Well, stamp duty is calculated automatically.
Yes, thanks to the entry of Adelaide in the development identification window.
Sure. So we can just put in our final conveyancing costs.
Right, $1,700 to settle the site.
Settle the site and all the other costs associated with conveyancing.
Yep, other than rates and taxes, I gather.
Yes. Selling and leasing, in this particular situation, we're going to keep all of the properties. So for the time being, we'll leave this at zero for now because we didn't end up selling the properties, or we weren't going to sell the properties. Other costs, yeah, sure, there were other costs as well. We had costs from the council. That was $1,700. And that was in June 2006. We had cost of demolition, $7,000, again in June 2006. And finally some subdivision costs as well. Subdivision costs, $14,007, and this was in September of 2006.
Right, and were they, did GST apply to that item?
No, GST didn't.
Okay.
So this is all of our costs. This is here is our final income, the sell-on income. This is what we predict the final products to be worth. We calculated this based on comparable sales. And we calculated that the first dwelling as a lump sum would be worth $420,000, and that would, the date would be the August 2007. We can copy these. For dwelling 2, we calculated $330,000. And so too for the third property.
Okay.
So, Mark, from this feasibility study, we could clearly see that there was a lot of profit to be made from this project. Our margin on development cost, the minimum that we're willing to accept, was 20%. We did keep these particular properties in this instant. If we were to have sold the properties, we could go back to costs and selling and leasing, and let's say the cost of selling the properties was 2%. These are the fees to the agent. We could apply that, and again, we'd still have a margin on development cost of over the minimum for us, 20%. In this instance, 23.12%. So clearly from this particular feasibility study, we had confidence that we could develop this site and make money off it. But not only did we have confidence that we could make money off it, but so did the banks that were going to fund us and provide us the money to do this project.
Sure. That's great.